Hello. Welcome.
It's daily Stoic time. Welcome to the party. We don't know what we're saying at the beginning of these episodes
or
yet.
During, or any other time.
We have no idea what we're doing. That's who you want to watch a video by, right?
Yes.
Okay, April 12th. We're talking about the entry for the day. And no, I'm sorry. We did this one yesterday. Yesterday's, to refresh us, was reject tantalizing gifts.
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're on April 13th, which is less is more.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get into it. Marcus Aurelius has a quote for us today. Don't act grudgingly, selfishly, without due diligence, or to be a contrarian. Don't overdress your thought in fine language. Don't be a person of too many words and too many deeds. Be cheerful, not wanting outside help or the relief others might bring. A person needs to stand on their own, not be propped up. Marcus. Shall we go sentence by sentence?
Sure, we can do that.
There's a lot in here. That's why I'm suggesting it. Don't act grudgingly.
Mm-hmm. Like, don't have grudges.
Yes. Yeah. So like revenge. Don't act with revenge selfishly.
Mm-hmm.
So selfishly, I'm going to define that as acting only with my self-interests in mind, not thinking about anybody else's needs. Without due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
So look into things before acting on them. Don't let the action be an impulse.
Yep.
Or to be a contrarian, which is the naysayer, constantly nitpicking things or having the devil's advocate point of view.
The downer type of it, yeah.
Yes, I find that very interesting because there's this thing between being skeptical and being cynical. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a very fine line. And that is what it makes me think of when he says the word contrarian. Don't be the cynical person who's coming into every conversation saying...
But due diligence is maybe
the skepticism. Yeah. So yes on the due diligence, no on the contrarianism. Don't overdress your thought in fine language.
Mm-hmm. Like don't try to sound more sophisticated than to impress someone or something, you know.
Yeah.
'Cause there's many ways of you can like communicate, and if you know when you're trying to communicate with all this like flowery language that communicates something and it's like I feel like it communicates kind of this like not only I'm better but I belong to this club of people who understand me and this other club who they're having problems or issues with understanding me. They're lower than us, the smart flowery language people, right? So it's like, but if you talk not with that, everyone understands you, right? So now it's like it's more inclusive to have more common language or something.
As somebody who overdresses my thoughts in fine language a lot, it doesn't, for me personally, feel like it's coming from a place of wanting to impress others. As like there may be a flavor of that to it, but that's not like the foundation of it. The foundation is actually when I dress my thoughts up in fancy language, I can get away with being less clear about what I'm trying to say. Because usually the fine language, there's a lot of words that people don't maybe understand all the way, or
understand
in a different
some,
way than I do. And now I've put 6 flowery words in a sentence, and how does my listener even begin to say, well, what do you mean by that? And what do you mean by that? And what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And so instead they think, well, I must just be dumb for not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the people listening feel, and they don't push back on it.
Right.
And meanwhile, what I'm doing is, it's just like, for whatever reason, maybe my brain learned the flowery language as a kid or something, and maybe it was initially to impress people. Now I think it's just a habit of me being unclear with my thought and what I'm trying to say. Because I always find that when I want to be clear about something, I'm using more simple language. And I would be stopping to define things like, hey, let's get on the same page about what this means, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So I really enjoy that he's calling it out in here, because this isn't something that you hear called out typically. Don't be a person of too many words and too many deeds. That's me.
That's kind of the kind of segues from the colored language to coloring the discussion or the interaction with too many words. So it's like, hey, no, these will be simpler words, but there will be many views will be introduced to create this image of some sort or something, right? So yeah.
You mean when somebody's using too many words?
Yeah.
Well, and where that comes from in me, because like I know like I'm someone who uses too many words or does too many deeds. Usually it's because there's some insecurity and I'm trying to prove my value. I'm very eager to make a difference, to put my own stamp on something. So maybe there is something about impressing other people really baked into this in a way that I'm not consciously aware of. But the too many words and too many deeds definitely feels like, again, coming from the place of trying to impress people, for sure. Ultimately. Because I'm insecure, because I don't feel good enough to sit back and let a deed go undone or something go unsaid.
Yeah, because unless you do the best, the impossible, then you're not fitting in the way you are without doing that. You know what I mean? So you're like, well, I'm the one who has to go save the day or something, you know, like you take on maybe too much. And now you're suffering from the consequences of taking too much on. But there is this thing of like, well, if I don't do it, then nobody will. And I have to do it because this nobody will is like, I don't want to be part of this thing that is not working or something, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what exactly, there could be many different reasons.
Yeah, there's not always like, it's not always I'm doing too many things because I believe that nobody else will. Sometimes it has nothing to do with, sometimes it does, like, oh, well, if I don't do this, nobody will. And that is like kind of a different thing of like, it's like also talking about like resentments from sort of like the past and this kind of weird stuff. But I'm just like talking about like walking into a meeting or a room full of people, and now it's like there's this tendency to want to do things, to get involved, to perform. And when I really look at where that's coming from, this sort of eagerness, underneath it is like this insecurity. I want to be accepted. I want to be liked. I want to fit in. All of this stuff.
That's interesting. Like, why would that be a bad thing? To wanting to fit in and like wanting to be perceived as contributor or something like.
I don't think it does.
Unless you're overdoing it. Like
That's
if
what
you're
I think it
overdoing,
is. Yeah.
If you're overdoing anything, it's
because this is what he says. He says, "Don't be a person of too many."
Too many. So have some.
Yeah, like, and I think all of this is like, it's this spectrum of things where it's not. I'm not trying to over-index one way or the other. I'm not trying to get rid of all my words and all of my deeds, and I'm not trying to ratchet them all the way up either. I need to find the middle ground. It just so happens that I'm probably over-indexed on the doing too much. And so I need to be honest with myself about where I am in that and then pull myself back into balance.
Cool.
You want to finish his quote?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh,
there's two more sentences. And I think we can do this together. So the rest of his quote is, "Be cheerful, not wanting outside help or the relief others might bring. A person needs to stand on their own, not be propped up." And that is also, like he says, like the relief others might bring. And I catch myself in that a lot, where there's like this want, this deep want inside of me for someone else to come in and solve the problem.
Or someone else to come and create the life that you wanted so bad. Like somebody is just like, like, oh, if I won lottery, then I can organize my life in the way how I always wanted it. And so that's the outside wishful thinking of, getting it from family or winning lottery or some sort of a lucky thing, instead of trying to build it yourself. Yeah.
You ready for Ryan? Okay, here's what Ryan Holiday has to say. "In most areas of life, the saying less is more stands true. For instance, the writers we admire tend to be masters of economy and brevity. What they leave out is just as important, sometimes more important, than what they leave in. There is a poem by Philip Levine titled, 'He would never use one word where none would do.' And from Hamlet, the best of all, the retort from Queen Gertrude after a long rhetorical speech from Polonius. 'More matter with less art,' she tells him. 'Get to the point.' Imagine the Emperor of Rome, with his captive audience and unlimited power, telling himself not to be a person of too many words and too many deeds. Let that be a reminder the next time you feel self-indulgent or a little full of yourself, the next time you feel like impressing people." That's cool. I'm glad he brought in the impressing people motif to this. And so I'm seeing that as like a very big theme here of this. He says, let that be a reminder the next time you feel self-indulgent or a little full of yourself. But for me, like what that really feels like is insecurity. Like I don't think about a moment in my life of like, oh, I'm being full of myself here. That's not my experience. Somebody might label me as being full of myself, but what I'm experiencing is actually an insecurity. Like I don't feel like I'm good enough, and therefore I need to make a show of it.
Yeah, I see that for sure. Yeah, I like this because it's relating. Like the entire time I was thinking about, like I'm interviewing for these jobs, and like trying to impress people during the interview process. It's such a balancing act to elevate yourself. You know, you might be interviewing again with other 10 people, so how do you make yourself stand out at the same time, not overdoing it by talking too much or talking too much about yourself, or like making yourself grandiose or something like that, you know, like Like how do you do that? And it's like, yeah, it's a very, it's almost like the second I think that I talk too much or I said something like too big, like, oh, I've done this project that there was this giant thing, then I go like, oh, I need to now let them, like I see when it's too much, when I'm actually, when it's coming out of my mouth, but I don't see it prior to it, like, oh wait, don't say that might be too big for this, say this other thing that's still humble, but still it's more humble, but it still highlights you, highlights your skill or whatever or character or whatever you're trying to, highlight. So so from that, that's my like a takeaway.
Well, it's almost like you have the thing that you want to say. You're like, you hear them maybe ask a question in the interview, and then you're like, okay, I know this is my general answer. This is where I want to take this thing. And something my brain is not used to doing is to put a pause there and say, okay, and now how do I want to communicate all of this to this person? And so it ends up coming out like word vomit because I haven't actually taken a moment to say, okay, let me come up with my hook for like how I'm going to get this person who doesn't know anything about this whole story I'm about to tell into this story, and then giving them just the bullet points that they would need so that they can then go deeper into the areas that interest them. It's I've kind of grew up and trained myself with communication of just saying things as they occur to me. And the older I get, the more I'm kind of struck by, oh wait, no, there's like the thought occurs, and then there's this very conscious and deliberate choice of what to do with that and how to communicate this and what to say and where to put a pause. And so I feel like he's kind of getting at that. He's addressing this as a skill. He's addressing this as like, hey, you have this tendency, because he's talking to himself here. And so he's telling himself, don't be a person of too many words and too many deeds. This is like the emperor of Rome who could have all the words and all the deeds if he wanted to. So clearly he struggles with this too, because he's reminding himself, hey, pull it back. And so I'm really enjoying this as a lesson, as like this, as like a skill acquisition. Like this is something I need to learn.
Do less is more. Less is more. Good. Awesome.
That sounds good. All right. Well, that was today's entry.